Welcome to St John's Laboratory Video Protocol Series. Today we will demonstrate to you how to carry out a Western blot. Western blotting allows you to detect and quantify specific proteins in a tissue sample. The proteins in your sample must first be separated by size using gel electrophoresis. To prepare your protein sample, combine the sample loading buffer, the reducing agent, distilled water and your protein sample in an Eppendorf tube. Boil your sample for 10 minutes in a preheated heating block set to 80 degrees Celsius so that only the primary structure remains. Meanwhile, prepare 800 ml of the running buffer. Take 200 ml from this and add 500 microliters of antioxidant. This ensures that the protein maintains a reduced state. Having removed the gel from its packaging, rinse it with distilled water and remove the plastic combs to create the wells. Place it in your Western blot gel tank and clamp it in place. Add the running buffer to the tank with the antioxidant in the inner compartment. Remove your protein sample from the heating block and centrifuge it so that it is mixed. Pipette 15 microliters of the protein sample into separate wells of the gel. In 2 wells, load 5 microliters of protein ladder, which will separate to form visible bands of determined molecular weights. These bands will enable us to determine the molecular weight of the protein detected in the sample. Put the lid on the tank and connect the wires to the appropriate voltage sockets. The voltage you use and the time you run the gel for will depend on the running buffer, so follow the manufacturer's advice. The separated proteins on your gel must now be transferred to a membrane. One way in which this can be done is through the semi-dry transfer method. Firstly, prepare the transfer buffer using the manufacturer's instructions. Here we will use PVDF membrane, however nitrocellulose membranes can also be used. Cut the membrane to size, activate it in methanol, then rinse it in distilled water before soaking it in transfer buffer. Cut 2 thick filter papers to size and immerse them in transfer buffer. In the semi-dry transfer machine, prepare the gel sandwich by placing 1 piece of pre-wetted filter paper on the bottom, followed by the membrane. Once the gel has run, unclamp it and remove it from the tank. Using a chisel, carefully separate the top panel of the case from the gel and cut away the wells section. Place the gel on top of the membrane and then finally the second piece of pre-wetted filter paper. Use a roller to remove any air bubbles. Secure the lid and connect the wires to their correct sockets, using the voltage and time recommended by the manufacturer. The electric current will draw the positively charged proteins towards the cathode and onto the membrane. Blocking reagent is applied to the surface of the membrane to prevent the antibody binding to unspecific proteins, which we are not interested in detecting. When the semi-dry transfer is complete, separate the gel sandwich and keep the membrane. Mark which side of the membrane the protein has been transferred onto by cutting the top right-hand corner. Immerse the membrane in blocking reagent made up of 5% non-fat dried milk and 5% fetal bovine serum. Incubate the membrane at 37 degrees Celsius for 60 minutes. In order to detect the specific protein that you are interested in, an antibody that binds to that protein is applied, which is known as the primary antibody. Use your blocking reagent to dilute the primary antibody to the recommended concentration. Remove the membrane from the blocking reagent and place it inside a small bag made from plastic film. Add the primary antibody solution and incubate the membrane at 4 degrees Celsius overnight on a shaker. The next day, any unbound antibody needs to be washed away. To do this, remove your membrane from the bag and immerse it in a container with TBST. Place on a shaker and leave for 30 minutes, repeating 3 times. The secondary antibody now needs to be applied. This binds to the primary antibody, enabling the protein to be visualized. The secondary antibody is typically conjugated to horseradish peroxidase, an enzyme which, when bound to a specific substrate, creates a detectable signal. Dilute the secondary antibody to the required concentration using your blocking buffer. Pour off the TBST from your membrane. Then add the secondary antibody solution. Leave on a shaker at room temperature for 1 hour. Any unbound secondary antibody must be removed by washing the membrane with TBST. Leave on a shaker for 30 minutes, repeating 3 times. By aligning the protein with the ladder, you can estimate the molecular weight of the protein and determine if your protein of interest has been detected.